I stood in the corner of the conference room, invisible as furniture, while my former boss prepared to sign away his company for $333 million. Derek Hartwell's gold pen hovered over the master sales agreement when the acquirer's lead counsel suddenly paused. He slid the document back across the mahogany table with one finger pointing to a specific clause. The room fell silent. Derek's face drained of color as the attorney read aloud about the named officer designation. Then Derek's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw something I'd waited 6 years to see: fear. The attorney, Arthur Wellington, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and spoke in a voice that cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Mr. Hartwell, before we proceed, I need clarification on Section 4.7. You've certified that all named officers under your operating agreement have been properly disclosed and compensated. However, our preliminary review suggests there may be discrepancies." Derek cleared his throat, his fingers drumming against the table. "I'm not sure what you mean. All officers are listed in the disclosure schedule." Arthur didn't blink. "The operating agreement references employees designated as named officers by the CEO through documented company communications. We need to verify that all such designations have been honored." I watched Derek's jaw tighten. Sweat formed along his hairline despite the frigid air conditioning. The MedCore Solutions team exchanged glances. Jonathan Ashford, their vice president of corporate development, leaned forward with evident concern. Derek forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "I think there's been some confusion. Let me get our corporate counsel to clarify the records. Perhaps we could take a brief recess." Arthur closed the folder in front of him with deliberate slowness. "I think that would be wise." As everyone filed out of the conference room, Derek shot me a look filled with such venom that I felt it like a physical blow. But I remained perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my expression neutral. This was the moment I'd sacrificed everything to reach. Let me take you back 6 years to when I still believed in promises. I was 27 years old when Derek Hartwell recruited me from my comfortable position at a mid-sized consulting firm in Dallas. His startup, Hartwell Technologies, occupied 3,000 square feet of co-working space in Austin, Texas, and consisted of 7 exhausted programmers surviving on coffee and ambition. Derek was building revolutionary data analytics software for healthcare systems, and he needed someone to transform his brilliant code into something hospitals would actually pay for. "You'd be employee number 8, Derek told me during our final interview, which he'd insisted on conducting over dinner at an upscale steakhouse near the Capitol. But you wouldn't be just any employee. You'd be building our entire client implementation division from scratch. You'd be director of client implementation." The title sounded impressive, but the salary he offered was $78,000, at least $15,000 below market rate for someone with my experience. I must have shown my disappointment because Derek leaned forward, his eyes bright with evangelical fervor. "Lynn, I'm not just offering you a job, I'm offering you a piece of the future." He pulled out a napkin and uncapped his fountain pen. "I'm giving you 3% equity in Hartwell Technologies. You'll be designated as a named officer in our operating agreement. When we exit, and we will exit, you'll be set for life. 3% of what we're building could mean millions." My heart raced as I watched him sketch out numbers on the napkin. 3%, named officer, millions. The words danced through my mind like promises of everything I'd worked for. "The paperwork will be formalized once we close our Series A funding," Derek assured me. "We're in late-stage negotiations now. Should close in the next 60 days. But I need you to start immediately. We've got 3 hospital systems ready to sign contracts, and they need someone like you to manage implementation. I accepted his offer that night. Looking back, I can see every red flag I missed. The lack of written agreements, the vague timeline, the way he waved away my questions about when exactly I'd receive the equity documents. But I was young and hungry and believed that successful people kept their word. Those early days were exhilarating. I worked 80 to 90 hours every week building processes and protocols from nothing. I personally pitched and closed our first 10 major hospital contracts, including a massive deal with Houston Methodist that brought in $2.4 million in annual recurring revenue. I created the implementation methodology that became our secret weapon, a white glove service that had clients singing our praises and renewing contracts at rates our competitors couldn't touch. The company exploded. Within 2 years, we'd grown from 8 employees to 45. Revenue climbed from $200,000 to $12 million annually. We closed our Series A, then our Series B. Derek moved us into a beautiful 20,000 square foot office with a coffee bar and ping-pong tables. He hired a chief financial officer, a chief technology officer, and a head of sales, who all drove luxury cars and talked about their stock options. And every few months I'd ask about my equity paperwork. "Let's wait until after the Series A closes," Derek said the first time. "Once we finish Series B, we'll formalize everything he promised the second time. Things are chaotic right now with the expansion. Let's wait until we're more stable," he explained the third time. By the fourth time, I asked, his responses had shifted from reassuring to irritated. "Lynn, you need to trust me. Do you think I'd forget about this? You're a valuable member of the team. We'll get to it." I wanted to believe him. I'd built something real at Hartwell Technologies. My client retention rate was 97%. Hospitals loved me. I'd trained a team of 12 implementation specialists who looked up to me. This was my company too, even without the paperwork. The company's 3rd anniversary party took place at a trendy rooftop venue overlooking downtown Austin. Derek spared no expense. There was an open bar, a live band catered food from the city's best restaurants. Everyone wore cocktail attire and toasted to our success. Derek gave a speech about vision and teamwork and how we were changing healthcare. I was standing near the bar nursing a glass of wine when I overheard Derek talking to Bradley Morrison, our chief financial officer. They stood just around the corner, voices lowered but not quite low enough. "What about equity cleanup before the acquisition talks?" Bradley asked. Derek laughed, and the sound made my blood freeze. "I told a few early employees they'd get equity to keep them motivated. Standard startup tactic. Keeps people working those 80-hour weeks. None of it's in writing. They can't prove anything." "Smart," Bradley replied. "Verbal promises are worth exactly what you pay for them." The room tilted. The music became distorted noise. I set my wine glass down, carefully afraid I'd drop it. 3 years of 80-hour weeks. 3 years of sacrificed weekends and missed family gatherings and relationships neglected. 3 years of promises. I waited until the party wound down, until most employees had left, until only Derek and a few executives remained. Then I approached him with what I hoped was a calm expression. "Derek, can we talk privately?" He glanced at his watch. "Lynn, it's late. Can it wait until Monday?" "No, it can't." Something in my voice made him pay attention. He nodded toward a quiet corner of the rooftop. We walked away from the others, and I turned to face him. "I heard what you said to Bradley about the equity promises." Derek's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. You were eavesdropping. You were standing 10 feet away at an open bar. I heard what I heard. You promised me 3% equity 6 years ago. You designated me as a named officer. You said it would be formalized after Series A. That was 4 years ago, Derek. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Honey, you think I'd give a low-level employee a share. You're director level. Officers are C-suite. You misunderstood what I said. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I didn't misunderstand. You wrote it on a napkin at dinner. 3%, named officer. You said those exact words. A napkin. Derek laughed. You're basing your claim on a napkin from 6 years ago. Do you even still have it? I didn't. Of course I didn't. Who keeps restaurant napkins for 6 years? Derek, you made me a promise. No, Lynn, you heard what you wanted to hear. I said we'd discuss equity opportunities in the future. I never made any binding commitment. And even if I did, which I didn't, verbal promises about equity aren't legally enforceable. You should know that. So you're just going to steal 6 years of my life? His expression hardened. Nobody stole anything. You've been paid a competitive salary. You've been promoted twice. You have a good job at a successful company. If that's not enough for you, maybe you should consider whether this is the right place for you. The threat was clear. Shut up or get out. I didn't shut up. I spent that weekend researching my options. I read employment law websites until my eyes burned. I drafted and redrafted an email to Derek laying out my case. Monday morning, I requested a meeting with him and sent a formal written request for my equity compensation, citing our original conversation and my contributions to the company's success. Derek's response came within an hour. He denied everything in writing, claiming I had misremembered our discussions and that no equity had ever been promised to anyone below the C-suite level. He suggested I was experiencing stress and offered to arrange counseling through our employee assistance program. I refused to let it go. I mentioned the napkin, the dinner, his specific words about named officer status. I said I was considering speaking with the board of directors or seeking legal counsel. That's when Derek's demeanor shifted from dismissive to dangerous. Within a week, my job transformed into a nightmare. Derek started attending every client meeting I ran, questioning my decisions in front of customers. He moved my 3 best team members to different departments without consulting me. He assigned me to low-priority projects that had nothing to do with my expertise. In leadership meetings, he publicly criticized my performance, bringing up minor mistakes from months prior. The other executives watched and learned. If Derek had turned against me, I was toxic. People who used to grab lunch with me suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Colleagues avoided eye contact in hallways. My work friends stopped including me in after-work gatherings. I tried to document everything. I kept detailed notes of every interaction, every meeting, every slight. I backed up my files. I saved emails that proved my performance had been exemplary right up until the moment I asked for my equity. I contacted Sarah Chen, an employment attorney, whose name I found through an online search. She listened to my story over coffee at a shop far from the office. "Do you have anything in writing?" Sarah asked. "Any email, text message, offer letter that mentions equity?" "No." He promised to formalize it after the Series A closed. "And the napkin?" "I threw it away years ago. I thought it was just a preliminary sketch. I expected real paperwork." Sarah's expression was sympathetic but not encouraging. "Lynn, I'll be honest with you. Without written documentation, you don't have an equity case. Texas is an at-will employment state. Verbal promises about equity are notoriously difficult to enforce. However, if Derek is retaliating against you for raising the issue, that might be actionable. But retaliation claims are hard to prove unless the adverse employment actions are severe and clearly connected to your complaint. What qualifies as severe? Termination, demotion with significant pay reduction, hostile work environment, so extreme that you're forced to resign. He's making my job impossible. Document everything. If it escalates to termination or constructive discharge, you might have a claim. But honestly, these cases are expensive to litigate and outcomes are uncertain. I thanked her and walked back to my car feeling more alone than I'd ever felt. My boyfriend Marcus tried to be supportive, but he didn't understand why I couldn't just move on. We'd been together for 3 years and he worked in commercial real estate, a field where deals were always documented and handshake agreements were considered absurd. "You made a mistake trusting him," Marcus said over dinner one evening. "I get that. But you don't have legal recourse. You need to cut your losses, find a new job, and walk away." "It's not about the money anymore," I tried to explain. "It's about what's right. He lied to me. He used me. Lots of bosses are terrible people. You can't fight them all. I can fight this one." Marcus set down his fork with more force than necessary. "At what cost, Lynn? You're obsessing over this. It's consuming you. I barely recognize you anymore. Because I won't give up when someone wrongs me. Because you're destroying yourself over something you can't win." Our relationship began to fracture. Every conversation circled back to Derek and Hartwell Technologies. Marcus grew frustrated with my single-minded focus. I grew resentful of what felt like his lack of support. Meanwhile, at work, Derek escalated his campaign. He started CCing me on emails where he criticized projects I'd completed months earlier. He held team meetings without inviting me, then sent me meeting notes highlighting decisions made without my input. He implemented new procedures that seemed designed specifically to create administrative burdens for my department. I reached out to 2 other early employees who I knew had received similar verbal equity promises. One was Marcus Sullivan, no relation to my boyfriend, who'd been employee number 5 and had built our entire technical infrastructure. The other was Jennifer Park, employee number 9, who'd created our marketing and brand strategy. I met them separately over coffee, speaking carefully. "Did Derek promise you equity when you joined?" I asked each of them. Both confirmed he had. Both said they'd been told it would be formalized later. Both admitted they no longer believed it would happen. "Will you speak up?" I asked. "Will you support me if I push this?" Marcus Sullivan shook his head immediately. "I've got 2 kids and a mortgage. I can't risk my job fighting Derek. I'm sorry, Lynn. I really am." Jennifer was more sympathetic but equally unwilling. "He's a billionaire, or he will be soon. He's got unlimited resources to bury us in legal fees. I have student loans. I can't afford the fight." They were right to be afraid. I knew that, but I couldn't accept it. Then came the Monday morning that changed everything. I arrived at the office at 7:30, same as always, and scanned my badge at the entrance. The light blinked red. I tried again. Red again. I walked to the security desk, confused. "My badge isn't working," I told the guard. He checked his computer, then picked up his phone. "I need to call HR. Please wait here." 20 minutes later, Caroline Reed from Human Resources appeared with a manila folder and an expression of professional sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "Lynn, please come with me." She escorted me to a small conference room where Derek's executive assistant waited with a laptop. Caroline sat across from me and opened the folder. "Lynn, we need to discuss some performance concerns that have been brought to our attention." She slid a document across the table. Performance Improvement Plan, it said at the top. Below that, 3 pages of complaints. Missed deadlines, poor communication, declining client satisfaction scores, unprofessional conduct in meetings. Every single item was either fabricated or wildly exaggerated. "This is nonsense," I said. "My client retention rate is 97%. I've never missed a major deadline. This is retaliation for asking about my equity." Caroline's expression didn't change. "We take all performance issues seriously. You'll have 30 days to demonstrate improvement in the areas outlined. You'll have weekly check-ins with your supervisor. At the end of 30 days, we'll reassess your performance and determine next steps. And if I don't improve to your satisfaction, then we'll have to consider whether this position is the right fit for you." I read through the document again, my hands shaking with rage. Then I saw the final page. It was an agreement I needed to sign acknowledging receipt of the PIP and agreeing to its terms. Buried in the fine print was language about confidentiality and non-disparagement. I couldn't discuss the PIP or Derek's management with anyone outside the company. I couldn't speak negatively about Hartwell Technologies to clients, partners, or the press. What if I don't sign? Caroline's sympathy evaporated. "Then you're terminated immediately for insubordination, and you forfeit your accrued vacation pay and any severance consideration." I was trapped. Sign away my right to speak or lose everything instantly. I thought about fighting it, walking out, calling a lawyer. But I needed time. Time to figure out a strategy. Time to find leverage. I signed the document with a hand that didn't feel like mine. "You'll start your PIP period tomorrow," Caroline said. "Your badge will be reactivated. Please remember that the terms of this agreement are confidential." I walked out of that office knowing I'd just signed away my voice, but I'd bought myself 30 days. I was going to make them count. The 30 days of my performance improvement plan were the most degrading of my professional life. Derek assigned me impossible tasks with unrealistic deadlines, then criticized me when I couldn't complete them perfectly. He had me write weekly self-assessments detailing my failures. He scheduled my check-in meetings for Friday afternoons at 5 o'clock, ensuring I spent every weekend dreading Monday. But I also used those 30 days strategically. I worked longer hours than ever, documenting every unreasonable demand. I met every deadline, no matter how impossible. I made sure my clients knew nothing was wrong, maintaining my 97% retention rate, even as my boss tried to destroy me from within. And I researched the company's board of directors. Hartwell Technologies had 3 board members beyond Derek. 2 were partners at venture capital firms that had invested in our Series A and Series B rounds. The third was Thomas Brennan, Derek's college roommate from Rice University, who'd invested $50,000 in the company's earliest days and now sat on the board as a favor friendship. I drafted a careful email to Catherine Yu, one of the VC partners. I didn't mention equity directly. Instead, I raised concerns about compensation practices and verbal agreements made to early employees that may not have been properly documented. I suggested the board might want to review the company's equity records before any potential exit events. I sent the email on a Friday afternoon and spent the weekend hoping I'd done the right thing. Monday morning, Derek called me into his office. His face was red and a vein pulsed in his temple. He held a printed copy of my email to Catherine. "She forwarded this to me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you really think you could go behind my back to the board?" My stomach dropped. I raised legitimate concerns about company practices. "You violated your PIP agreement. The confidentiality clause prohibits you from discussing internal matters with investors. The board members are investors. Lynn. I hadn't thought of that. The confidentiality language had been vague enough that I'd convinced myself it didn't apply to the board. I'd been wrong. Derek leaned back in his chair, and his anger transformed into something worse. Satisfaction. You've put me in a difficult position. I wanted to give you a fair chance to improve, but you've demonstrated you can't be trusted. Caroline from HR entered the office, along with Bradley Morrison, the CFO. They'd been waiting outside. Lynn, we're giving you a choice, Derek said. You can resign today effective immediately with 2 weeks of severance pay. Or we can terminate you for cause for violating your PIP agreement, in which case you receive nothing and we contest any unemployment benefits you try to claim. The room spun. I'd made a catastrophic mistake, and Derek had trapped me perfectly. If I was fired for cause, I'd have almost no legal recourse. Future employers would see a termination on my record. I'd lose my unemployment safety net. But if I resigned, I was admitting defeat. I need time to think, I said. You have until end of business today, Derek replied. 5 o'clock. Let HR know your decision. I spent that day in a fog. I called Sarah Chen, my employment attorney, from my car in the parking garage. They've got you, she said after I explained. The confidentiality clause is broad enough to include communications with investors. If you fight the for-cause termination, it'll be expensive and you'll probably lose. If you resign, you at least preserve your ability to claim unemployment, and you avoid a termination on your record. What about my equity claim? Lynn, you never had an equity claim you could win. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you differently. I sat in my car for 2 hours, staring at the concrete wall, feeling 6 years of my life crumble into dust. I thought about Marcus, who'd broken up with me the week before because I wouldn't let this go. I thought about my mother in Pennsylvania, who'd been begging me to leave Austin and move home. I thought about everything I'd sacrificed. And I thought about Derek's smug face, knowing he'd won. At 4:45, I walked into HR and told Caroline I'd resign. She had the paperwork already prepared. I signed documents releasing Hartwell Technologies from any claims. I returned my laptop, my badge, and my company credit card. By 5:15, I was walking out of the building for the last time, carrying a cardboard box with the few personal items from my desk. But I'd left something important in that office. I'd left my hope. The next weeks were brutal. I burned through my savings paying rent on my apartment. I sent out dozens of resumes but struggled to explain why I'd left Hartwell Technologies after 6 years. I couldn't tell the truth without risking a defamation lawsuit. I couldn't lie convincingly. Marcus wouldn't return my calls. My friends, most of whom worked in tech, had heard whispers about why I'd left. The industry is small. Reputations spread. Then I got a message from Amy Kowalski. Amy was the paralegal at Hartwell Technologies, someone I'd chatted with occasionally in the break room. She asked to meet me for coffee. We met at a shop on the outskirts of Austin, far from anyone we knew. Amy looked nervous, glancing around before she spoke. I feel awful about what happened to you, she said. I wanted you to know that Derek planned the whole thing. He had IT monitor my system access. When I gave you that maintenance code for his office, it triggered an alert. My blood went cold. What maintenance code? Amy's face fell. Oh no, you don't know, do you? This is even worse than I thought. She explained that Derek had suspected I might try to find documentation to support my equity claim. He'd had IT flag any after-hours access to executive offices. He'd positioned the journal in his desk drawer deliberately like bait. When I'd entered his office that night thinking I was finally getting proof, I'd walked straight into his trap. Except I'd never entered his office at all. Amy, I never went to Derek's office. I never asked you for any access code. She stared at me. But Derek said he caught you photographing his founder's journal. He showed security footage to HR. A cold realization washed over me. Can you get me that security footage? I don't have access to security systems. But Lynn, there's something else you should know. Derek is in acquisition talks. A big healthcare conglomerate wants to buy Hartwell Technologies. The deal is worth $333 million. He stands to personally make over $200 million. $333 million. For the company I'd helped build. 3% of that would be nearly $10 million. When does the deal close? I asked. Soon. Maybe 90 days. They're moving fast. I thanked Amy and sat alone after she left, my mind racing. Derek had set a trap for me, one I'd apparently fallen into even though I'd never done what he claimed, which meant he'd fabricated the evidence, which meant he was desperate to silence me before the acquisition. The acquisition was his vulnerability. Major corporations conducted extensive due diligence. If I could prove Derek had defrauded employees about equity, it could tank the deal. But I couldn't use evidence I didn't have and hadn't obtained. I needed another way. That night I made two decisions. First, I'd take whatever plea deal Derek's fabricated evidence forced me into, making him think I was defeated. Second, I'd find a legal way to get the truth to the acquiring company. I just needed to figure out how to do the second part without destroying myself completely in the process. 3 days after my conversation with Amy, 2 police officers knocked on my apartment door. They had a warrant for my arrest on charges of criminal trespassing and attempted theft of trade secrets. According to the warrant, I'd broken into Hartwell Technologies' offices after hours and attempted to steal proprietary business information. I spent a night in county jail, sharing a cell with 2 other women, trying to process how my life had collapsed so completely. The concrete walls were cold. The fluorescent lights never turned off. I didn't sleep. The next morning I was arraigned. The prosecutor requested bail of $25,000, arguing I was a flight risk because I'd already demonstrated willingness to commit corporate espionage. My court-appointed attorney, an overworked public defender, barely glanced at my file before the hearing. My mother used her retirement savings to post bail. She flew in from Pennsylvania, her face lined with worry, and took me back to my apartment. We didn't speak during the drive. What was there to say? I used the last of my savings to hire a criminal defense attorney named Patricia Reeves. She came highly recommended and charged $300 an hour. Within a week, I'd spent $8,000, and my bank account was nearly empty. Patricia reviewed the evidence against me. The prosecution had security footage showing someone in a hoodie entering Derek's office at 11:30 at night, 3 weeks before I'd resigned. The figure photographed documents with a phone. The face wasn't clearly visible, but the timestamp matched my claimed presence in the building according to badge swipe records Amy had supposedly provided. "Did you do it?" Patricia asked me directly. "No. I've never been in Derek's office after hours. I don't know who that person is in the video, but it's not me." "Can you prove you were somewhere else that night?" I checked my phone's location history. On the night in question, I'd been at my apartment, but I lived alone. I had no alibi. My phone's GPS data showed I'd been in the same location from 7 in the evening until 7 the next morning, but that only proved my phone had been there. "The trespassing charge will definitely stick," Patricia explained. "The prosecution has badge swipe records and video footage." Even if we argue the video doesn't definitively show your face, the badge records are damning. Those records are falsified. I never swiped my badge that night. Do you have any proof they're falsified? I didn't. Of course I didn't. The theft of trade secrets charge is shakier. Patricia continued. What the person in the video photographed appears to be a personal journal, not technical specifications or client data. That's a weaker case for trade secrets. But the district attorney is charging it as a felony, which means they're serious about prosecution. She laid out my options. I could go to trial where I'd face a jury with video evidence and badge records against me. If convicted on both charges, I could face 2 to 10 years in prison. Or I could accept a plea agreement. The DA's offer arrived within a week. Plead guilty to misdemeanor criminal trespassing. 1 year of probation. 200 hours of community service. A fine of $5,000. And permanent, irrevocable relinquishment of any and all claims against Hartwell Technologies or Derek Hartwell personally. If you don't take this deal, they'll prosecute the felony, Patricia warned. A felony conviction would destroy any chance you have of rebuilding your career. You'd be a convicted felon. Background checks would eliminate you from most jobs. Even if you managed to win at trial, which is unlikely given the evidence, you'd spend tens of thousands on legal fees. I sat in Patricia's office staring at the plea agreement, feeling the walls close in. Everything I'd fought for reduced to this moment. Sign away my rights forever or risk prison. But then Patricia said something that changed everything. Before you decide, there's something you should know. I looked at the photos the prosecution submitted as evidence. They show pages from what appears to be a journal. I enlarged the images. Some of the text is visible. She turned her laptop toward me. In the grainy photographs taken by whoever had been in Derek's office, I could see handwritten notes. One entry dated 6 years earlier read clearly, hired Lynn Castellano. Promised 3% equity plus named officer status. Will formalize post-Series A. My heart stopped. That proves my claim. It would, Patricia said carefully, if the evidence had been obtained legally. But it wasn't. This evidence is fruit of the poisonous tree. We can't use it in any civil case against Derek. And ironically, the prosecution is using it to charge you with attempting to steal it. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. I had proof I'd never obtained, proving a claim I could no longer make, being used to prosecute me for a crime I hadn't committed. There's more, Patricia said. While researching the background of this case, I did some digging into Hartwell Technologies. They're in active acquisition negotiations with Medcore Solutions. The deal is worth $333 million. The transaction is scheduled to close in approximately 60 days. I know, I said. Someone told me. Did they tell you that major acquisitions like this require extensive due diligence, that the acquiring company will review employment practices, compensation structures, and outstanding liabilities, that they specifically look for undisclosed equity obligations, because those can affect the purchase price? I saw where she was going. If Medcore knew Derek had made equity promises to employees he never honored, it could affect the deal. It could tank the deal entirely or force a renegotiation. At minimum, it would require Derek to settle those obligations before closing. But I can't tell them. The plea agreement requires me to relinquish all claims. The plea agreement requires you to relinquish claims against Derek and Hartwell Technologies. It doesn't prevent you from providing truthful information to third parties conducting legal due diligence. It doesn't prevent you from responding to subpoenas or regulatory inquiries. And it certainly doesn't prevent other people from discovering information through their own legal channels. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you carefully consider all your options before signing this plea agreement. I'm suggesting that you think about whether there might be legitimate ways for the truth to surface during Medcor's due diligence process. And I'm suggesting that you remember the difference between making a claim yourself and having facts discovered through proper legal channels. I met her eyes. If I take this plea deal, Derek thinks he's won. He thinks I'm defeated and silent. That makes him complacent. Hypothetically, Patricia said carefully, yes, that might be the case. I signed the plea agreement that afternoon. The news ran a small story. Former Hartwell Technologies employee accepts guilt in corporate espionage attempt. My name was publicly attached to criminal conduct. My reputation, what remained of it, was shredded. But I'd bought myself something valuable, time, and the element of surprise. Derek thought he'd destroyed me. He was about to learn he was wrong. After my plea deal became public, I became unemployable in Austin's tech industry. I moved to a tiny studio apartment on the far edge of the city where rent was $650 a month. I took a job as a customer service representative at a call center, making $13 an hour, 40 hours a week. I took phone calls from angry customers about internet service issues and cell phone bills. It was humiliating. I had a degree from the University of Texas. I'd built a multi-million-dollar division at a successful startup. Now I was reading scripts to people who screamed at me about charges they didn't understand. But the job gave me what I needed: time to plan, and just enough money to survive. I spent every spare moment researching Medcor Solutions. They were a massive healthcare technology conglomerate based in Chicago, with annual revenues exceeding $12 billion. They'd acquired 17 companies in the past 5 years, integrating their technologies into a comprehensive platform for hospital systems nationwide. The acquisition of Hartwell Technologies made strategic sense. Our data analytics software would complement Medcor's existing electronic health records platform. But Medcor had a reputation for thorough due diligence and ethical business practices. They'd walked away from 3 acquisitions in the past 2 years after discovering undisclosed liabilities or questionable business practices. The acquisition process was being led by Jonathan Ashford, Medcor's Vice President of Corporate Development. I found his LinkedIn profile, his educational background from Northwestern, his 20-year career in corporate acquisitions. He'd spent 5 years at a major consulting firm before joining Medcor. He had a reputation for being detail-oriented and uncompromising. I needed to get information about Derek's equity deception to Jonathan Ashford or his due diligence team, but I couldn't contact them directly. The plea agreement prohibited me from making claims against Derek. And even if it didn't, my credibility was destroyed. I was a convicted criminal. Who would believe me? I needed someone else to discover the information, through legitimate means. Amy Kowalski still worked at Hartwell Technologies. I'd been thinking about her since our last conversation. She'd felt guilty about my arrest, not knowing I'd never actually tried to break into Derek's office. She had access to corporate records. She was a paralegal, trained in document management and legal procedures. If Amy discovered evidence of Derek's equity promises in the normal course of her job, she could report it to the board or to Medcor's due diligence team without implicating me. I called Amy from a burner phone I'd bought at a convenience store. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop 30 miles outside Austin in a small town where no one would recognize us. Amy looked thinner than I remembered, stressed. She ordered a large coffee with 3 shots of espresso and sat across from me in a corner booth. "I heard about the plea deal," she said. "Lynn, I'm so sorry. I feel responsible." "You didn't do anything wrong. Derek set me up. The security footage, the badge records it, was all fabricated. I should have realized. I should have known he'd try something." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "Amy, I need your help, but I need you to understand the risk. If Derek finds out you're helping me, he'll destroy you too." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "What do you need?" I explained my idea. The acquisition due diligence process would require Hartwell Technologies to produce thousands of documents. Employment agreements, compensation records, corporate communications about equity and ownership. Amy, as a paralegal, would be involved in organizing and producing those documents. If you discovered evidence of Derek's verbal equity promises while performing your normal job duties, you'd have an obligation to ensure it's included in the due diligence production. That's not helping me. That's doing your job correctly. Amy bit her lip. The original emails are probably on the server somewhere. Derek's journal, if it really exists, would be proprietary. But there might be early employment discussions, offer letters, compensation memos. Anything that shows Derek promised equity to early employees who didn't receive it. If I find something and include it in the due diligence production, Derek will know it came from me. I'm the only paralegal with access to those files. Then, you need plausible deniability. Make it look accidental. Include it in a massive document dump where it's one item among thousands. Let MedCor's attorneys find it themselves. Amy stared at her coffee for a long time. Finally, she looked up. "I have student loans worth $83,000. I can't afford to lose my job. I can't afford to be blacklisted like you were." "I know. I wouldn't ask if there was another way. Why does this matter so much to you? You're never getting that equity. Even if Derek's forced to honor his promises, your plea deal waived your claims. You can't benefit from this." "It's not about me anymore," I said, and I meant it. "It's about what's right. Derek lied to people. He used us. He's about to walk away with $200 million built on the work of employees he cheated. If he succeeds, he'll do it again at his next company. Someone has to stop him." Amy finished her coffee. "Let me think about it. I'll call you." She didn't call. A week passed, then 2. The acquisition moved forward. I saw press releases about MedCor's due diligence team arriving in Austin. I imagined Derek charming them, showing them the beautiful offices, the happy employees, the impressive technology. And I felt my last hope dying. Then, on a Tuesday night, in late September, my burner phone rang. It was Amy. "I changed my mind," she said without preamble. "I found something else." My heart raced. "What?" "While organizing files for the due diligence, I discovered old email correspondence between Derek and the original company attorney. This was 6 years ago, right after the company formed. Derek explicitly mentioned offering equity to key early hires. He named you specifically. He wrote that you'd be designated as a named officer per the operating agreement template. Where are these emails? On the corporate server. They're part of the official company record. The attorney responded with standard boilerplate equity agreement templates, but the agreements were never executed. I don't know why. Amy, those emails prove everything. I know, but there's a problem. Derek told me to purge all emails older than 5 years as part of routine records management before MedCor's document review. I'm supposed to run the deletion script tomorrow morning. Once they're gone permanently. Tomorrow morning, less than 12 hours. Can you preserve them? I asked. If I preserve them and include them in the due diligence production, Derek will know I did it deliberately. There's no plausible deniability. But if you delete them, the evidence is gone forever. Amy was quiet for a moment. If I include them in the production, I lose my job. Probably worse. Derek will retaliate. You know he will. I know. But if I delete them, Derek gets away with everything. And 2 other early employees besides you also have outstanding equity claims, Marcus Sullivan and Jennifer Park. They'll never get what they're owed. I heard the struggle in her voice. She was a good person trapped in an impossible situation, just like I'd been. Amy, I can't tell you what to do. I've already cost you too much. No, she said firmly. Derek cost us. Not you. I'll do it. I'll include the emails in the document production. But Lynn, if Derek discovers what I've done before MedCorp sees the emails, he'll destroy them and fire me anyway. The timing has to be perfect. We worked out a plan. Amy would include the email correspondence in a massive document production scheduled for Thursday. Thousands of pages would go to MedCorp's due diligence attorneys. The emails would be buried in the Volume 1 item among many. With luck, Derek wouldn't review the entire production before it left the building. MedCorp's team would find the emails during their review. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only plan we had. I thanked Amy and hung up. Then I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, praying that this time finally something would go right. The due diligence team from MedCorp arrived at Hartwell Technologies on a Wednesday morning. Amy called me from the bathroom at work, whispering updates. 6 attorneys and 3 technical consultants set up in the large conference room. They'd requested thousands of documents covering every aspect of the company's operations, finances, employment practices, and technology. Amy's document production went out Thursday afternoon. 15,000 pages organized by category delivered electronically to MedCorp's secure server. The email correspondence about equity compensation was buried in Section 7, subsection 4 pages, 4,218 through 4,223. Amy texted me from her personal phone. It's done. Now we wait. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I went to work at the call center and took angry phone calls in a fog, wondering if Derek had discovered the emails, yet wondering if MedCorp's team would find them, wondering if this desperate gambit would save or destroy us. Friday passed. Then the weekend. Monday morning, Amy called me in tears. Derek found out. He reviewed the document production log this morning. He saw the email correspondence was included. He called me into his office an hour ago. My stomach dropped. What happened? He fired me. He said I was incompetent, that I'd included privileged attorney-client communications in the production by mistake. He had security escort me out immediately. I cleared my desk in a box while everyone watched. It was humiliating. Amy, I'm so sorry. It gets worse. Derek's attorney has already contacted MedCorp's legal team demanding return of the documents. He's claiming they contain attorney-client privileged material that was included in error. Everything was falling apart. The plan had failed. Amy had sacrificed her job for nothing. But then Amy said something that gave me a sliver of hope. MedCorp's attorneys refused to return the documents immediately. They said they need to review them first to determine if there's actually privileged material. That review could take days. So the emails are still in their possession. They might still see what's in them. Days. We had days for Medcor's attorneys to discover what Derek was trying to hide. I spent those days in agony. I helped Amy update her resume. I sent her money I couldn't afford to spare. I waited for news that never came. Then Wednesday afternoon, Patricia Reeves called me. "Lynn, something's happening with the Hartwell acquisition. My partner does corporate law, and he mentioned hearing that Medcor put the deal on hold pending resolution of equity disputes. Do you know anything about this?" "I might," I said carefully. "Derek's attorney called me this morning. He wants to meet. He said Derek is willing to discuss a settlement." My hands shook as I processed this. "What kind of settlement?" He didn't say. "But Lynn, if the acquisition is on hold because of equity issues, Derek is under enormous pressure. That $333 million deal is slipping away. His investors and board members are probably furious. He's desperate." "When does he want to meet?" "Tomorrow, 2:00. He specifically said he wants you there." I met Patricia at her office. We walked together to a conference room at Derek's attorney's firm, a gleaming tower in downtown Austin. Derek was already there, with his attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Paulson. Derek looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. Richard did the talking. "My client is willing to offer Miss Castellano $500,000 to sign a comprehensive release and provide a sworn statement validating his due diligence representations to Medcor Solutions." I looked at Patricia. She raised an eyebrow. I spoke directly to Derek. "I want what you promised me 6 years ago, 3% equity or no deal." Derek's face turned red. "You waived all claims in your plea agreement." "The plea agreement prevented me from making claims against you. It didn't prevent Medcor from discovering the truth during their legal due diligence process. You orchestrated this. You got that paralegal to plant those emails." Amy Kowalski performed her job duties correctly. She included relevant employment documents in a production you authorized. If you're upset about what those documents revealed, that's your problem, not mine. Richard tried to regain control. "Miss Castellano, be reasonable. $500,000 is a generous offer, particularly given your circumstances. 3% of $333 million is approximately $10 million, I replied. "Your offer is 5% of what I'm owed." "That's not generous. That's insulting." Derek stood abruptly. "I'll destroy you. I'll make sure that felony charge comes back. I'll prosecute you for conspiracy. You'll go to prison." Patricia spoke calmly. "Mr. Hartwell, Miss Castellano hasn't violated any terms of her plea agreement. She hasn't contacted Medcor. She hasn't made claims. The discovery of your equity promises came through Medcor's legal due diligence, which you cannot prevent or obstruct without committing fraud. If you attempt to retaliate against my client further, we'll file a motion to set aside her plea agreement based on newly discovered evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and fabricated charges. The security footage and badge records you used to charge her were falsified. We can prove it now. How do you think that will look?" Derek stared at her. His attorney whispered something to him. Derek sat back down, defeated. 3%, I repeated. "Pay what you owe, or watch your deal collapse." Richard Paulson requested a recess. Derek and his attorney left the room. Patricia and I sat in silence. After 20 minutes, they returned. "My client cannot agree to your demand," Richard said. "However, he's willing to increase the settlement offer to $2 million. 3%, I said again. We went back and forth for another hour. 2.5 million, 3 million. They were inching closer, but still far from what I was owed. Finally, I stood. "Gentlemen, I'm done negotiating. You have my demand. Take it to your board. Take it to MedCorp. Take it wherever you need to take it. But I'm not accepting anything less than what was promised." I walked out. Patricia followed, looking concerned. "Lynn, $3 million is life-changing money. You might not get another offer." "I know, but I'm not backing down." 3 days later, MedCorp formally notified Derek that they were suspending the acquisition pending resolution of all outstanding equity claims. The news leaked to the tech press. Articles appeared about Hartwell Technologies' troubled acquisition, mentioning disputes over employee compensation. Derek's phone probably rang nonstop with angry investors and board members. And 5 days after that, Patricia called with news. MedCorp's lead counsel wants to meet with you. They're not satisfied with Derek's explanations. They want to hear your side directly. Can they do that? Won't Derek's attorney object? They're the acquiring company. They can interview whoever they want during due diligence. Derek can't stop them without tanking the deal himself. I met with Arthur Wellington, MedCorp's lead counsel, in a neutral conference room. He was in his early 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for being absolutely thorough. He'd brought one other attorney and a court reporter. Arthur asked me to walk through my entire history with Hartwell Technologies. Every promise Derek made, every conversation about equity, the napkin at dinner, the years of delays, the retaliation when I asked questions, the fabricated criminal charges. I told him everything. 3 hours of testimony interrupted only by his careful questions, seeking clarification or additional detail. When I finished, Arthur removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Miss Castellano, we've reviewed the email correspondence that was produced during due diligence. We've interviewed Derek's original attorney. We've examined your employment records and performance reviews. The evidence supports your account. Derek Hartwell made specific equity promises to you and other early employees that he failed to honor. He then fabricated evidence to criminally prosecute you when you attempted to hold him accountable." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on several factors. But I can tell you this: MedCorp does not acquire companies with unresolved equity disputes or questionable employment practices. Derek has 2 options. He honors his equity obligations to you and the other affected employees, or we walk away from the acquisition entirely. Will he honor them? He doesn't have much choice. His board won't let him lose a $333 million acquisition over this. The pressure on him right now is extraordinary." I left that meeting feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but possibility. 2 weeks later, Patricia called. Derek's attorney just sent over a revised settlement proposal. "But Lynn, this isn't a settlement anymore. It's an acknowledgement of your original equity agreement. They're formally recognizing you as a named officer, with 3% equity in Hartwell Technologies, effective upon closing of the MedCorp acquisition." I sat down hard. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. They're also paying your legal fees and providing a written apology acknowledging the criminal charges were improperly filed. The district attorney has agreed to expunge your record." Why would Derek agree to this? Because MedCorp insisted. It's in the revised acquisition agreement. All equity disputes must be resolved and documented before closing. Derek fought it, but his board overruled him. They threatened to remove him as CEO if he didn't comply. 3%, $10 million, everything I'd fought for. When do I sign? The formal acknowledgement is part of the acquisition closing documents. You'll need to be present at the signing ceremony. Which brought me back to where I started, standing in that conference room watching Derek's world crumble as mine was finally impossibly restored. Arthur Wellington looked up from the master sales agreement and fixed his gaze on Derek. The other MedCorp executives watched with varying expressions of confusion and concern. Jonathan Ashford, the Vice President of Corporate Development, leaned forward with obvious interest. "Mr. Hartwell Arthur," said with careful precision, "Section 4.7 of this agreement explicitly states that all named officers under your operating agreement must be properly disclosed and compensated before closing. You certified in your due diligence representations that all such officers were listed, yet Miss Castellano's name does not appear anywhere in your disclosure schedules, despite evidence that you designated her as a named officer 6 years ago." Derek's attorney Richard Paulson jumped in. That dispute was resolved through a private settlement. Miss Castellano accepted $2 million in exchange for releasing all claims. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. My voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. That settlement addressed employment-related disputes. It said nothing about my named officer designation or equity compensation. Arthur nodded. "We've reviewed Miss Castellano's settlement agreement carefully. It's quite artfully drafted. It releases claims for wrongful termination and retaliation, but it explicitly preserves her status under the operating agreement." He slid a document across the table to Derek. "This is the operating agreement filed when Hartwell Technologies Incorporated. Section 2.4 clearly states, any employee designated as a named officer by the CEO through written or documented company communications shall retain that designation unless formally revoked through proper board action." Miss Castellano's designation was never revoked. Derek's face had gone from red to white. This is absurd. She's twisting legal technicalities. "No, Mr. Hartwell Arthur," replied coolly. "You made a promise to an employee, documented it in writing, and then spent 6 years trying to avoid honoring that promise. When she attempted to hold you accountable, you filed false criminal charges against her. That's not a technicality. That's fraud." Jonathan Ashford cleared his throat. "Arthur, what's MedCorp's position here?" "Our position is clear. We will not close this acquisition until all legitimate equity obligations are resolved. Miss Castellano is entitled to her 3% equity stake as promised. Derek must honor that obligation, or we walk away." The two venture capital partners on Hartwell's board exchanged glances. Catherine Yu, the VC who'd forwarded my email to Derek months ago, spoke up. "Derek, you need to agree to this. We cannot lose this acquisition over your personal vendetta against a former employee." "It's not a vendetta," Derek protested. "She tried to steal proprietary information." "She tried to prove you'd lied to her," Catherine shot back. "And the evidence shows she was right. The board has already discussed this. If you don't agree to honor her equity, we're voting to remove you as CEO and appointing interim leadership who will." Derek looked around the table, seeing no allies. His investors had turned against him. The acquiring company was prepared to walk. His attorney sat silent, knowing there was no legal argument left. "Fine," Derek said, through gritted teeth. "Give her the equity." Arthur Wellington pulled out a revised document. This amendment to the acquisition agreement formally recognizes Lynn Castellano as a named officer of Hartwell Technologies with 3% equity effective upon closing. Miss Castellano, please review and sign. Patricia Reeves, who'd been sitting beside me, reviewed the document first. She nodded to me. I picked up the pen and signed my name, my hand surprisingly steady. Arthur collected the signed amendment and added it to the acquisition file. Now we can proceed with the closing. The next hour was a blur of signatures and legal procedures. Papers passed around the table. Attorneys verified signatures and dates. Wire transfer instructions were exchanged. And finally, Arthur Wellington declared the acquisition complete. MedCore Solutions had purchased Hartwell Technologies for $333 million. Derek would walk away with approximately $196 million for his 68% stake, minus legal fees and expenses. And I would receive $9,990,000 for my 3%. As everyone stood and began gathering their materials, Derek walked past me toward the door. He stopped and turned back, his expression a mixture of hatred and defeat. "You destroyed me," he said quietly. "No, Derek. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to let you destroy me too." He walked out without another word. I never saw him again. The wire transfer hit my bank account 3 business days later. $9,990,000. I stared at my phone screen, unable to process that the number was real. The first thing I did was pay Patricia Reeves. Her final bill was $43,000. I paid it immediately and added a $50,000 bonus. "Lynn, you don't need to do that," she protested. "Yes, I do. You believed in me when nobody else did. You found the legal strategy that saved me. This is the smallest way I can thank you." The second thing I did was reach out to Amy Kowalski. I sent her $200,000 with a note for your courage and sacrifice. I hope this helps with those student loans. Amy called me crying. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll write me a reference letter when you're ready to look for a new job. And say you'll never let anyone make you feel small again." The third thing I did was contact Marcus Sullivan and Jennifer Park, the other early employees Derek had cheated. I hired attorneys for both of them and funded their legal claims. Marcus received a settlement of $1.2 million. Jennifer received $900,000. Derek fought both cases, but after my equity was validated, he had no credibility left. I donated $1 million to legal aid organizations that help employees fight workplace fraud and discrimination. I funded a scholarship program for women in technology at the University of Texas. I paid off my mother's mortgage and sent her on the European vacation she'd always dreamed about. And I started my own consulting firm. Castellano Equity Consulting specializes in helping startups build ethical, transparent compensation structures. I teach founders how to honor their promises to early employees. I help employees understand their rights and document their agreements. I work with venture capital firms to conduct equity audits before acquisitions. The work is meaningful in ways my old job never was. I'm not just building someone else's company anymore. I'm building a practice dedicated to preventing what happened to me from happening to others. 6 months after the acquisition closed, I ran into Marcus, my ex-boyfriend, at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. He approached hesitantly. "I heard what happened," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in you." "You weren't wrong to be concerned," I replied. "It was a long shot. I could have lost everything. But you didn't. You won. Eventually. After losing almost everything first." We talked for a few minutes about where our lives had gone. He was engaged to someone new. I was genuinely happy for him. We parted on good terms with no bitterness left between us. I still think about those 6 years sometimes. The promises and betrayals, The nights in jail and the months of humiliation. The moments when I came so close to giving up. I think about what that fight cost me. My job, my relationship, my reputation, my savings, my freedom. But I also think about what giving up would have cost. My dignity, my sense of justice, my belief that standing up for what's right matters even when it seems impossible. Standing up for yourself costs something. It might cost your job, your relationships, your reputation, even your freedom for a time. The people who wrong you will have more money, more power, more resources. They'll use every weapon at their disposal to silence you. They'll make you doubt yourself. They'll make you feel small and powerless and crazy for fighting battles you can't win. But the cost of not standing up, of letting people steal your dignity and laugh while they do it, is far higher. That cost is permanent. It's the cost of looking in the mirror and knowing you surrendered to injustice because it was easier than fighting. I learned that written agreements matter, but courage matters more. Documentation is important, but persistence is everything. The system is designed to protect the powerful, but the system has cracks. And if you're willing to sacrifice everything, if you refuse to quit no matter how many times you're knocked down, sometimes impossibly justice wins. Derek tried to make me disappear. He tried to convince me I didn't deserve what I'd earned. He used every advantage he had, every dirty trick, every weapon in his arsenal. And for a long time it looked like he'd succeeded. But I knew my worth. I knew what I'd built. And I knew that truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually surfaces. I stand in my office now looking out over downtown Austin. The office isn't huge or fancy. It doesn't have a coffee bar or ping pong tables. But it's mine. I built it with money I earned, standing up for what was right. I'm not fighting someone else's betrayal anymore. I'm helping other people fight theirs. And every time someone walks into my office with a story like mine, every time I help an employee document their promises or negotiate their equity, every time I teach a founder to treat their team with honesty and respect, I know that fight was worth it. Justice delayed is still justice. And sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up teaching you exactly how strong you really are. I hope you never face what I faced. But if you do, I hope you remember this. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not determined by people who try to diminish you. And standing up for yourself, no matter the cost, is always worth it in the end. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where someone in power betrayed your trust or broke a promise that changed your life? How did you respond? Did you fight back, or did you walk away? What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own experiences with workplace injustice, or inspired you to stand up for what's right, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you want to hear more stories about people who refused to give up when the world told them they'd already lost, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I share new stories every week about courage, justice, and the power of refusing to be silenced. Finally, if you know someone who's fighting their own battle against injustice, someone who needs to hear that persistence and courage can overcome even the most powerful adversaries, please share this story with them. Sometimes we all need reminding that we're stronger than we think, and that standing up for ourselves is always worth the fight. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, your voice matters, your experiences matter, and you deserve to be treated with honesty and respect. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Keep fighting for what's right. Keep believing in justice, and never, ever give up.